What is cadastre? The cadastre is the inventory or census to update and classify of real estate belonging to the state and individuals in order to achieve their correct physical, legal, fiscal, and economic identification. Why is it important? First, Bogota has 2,608,000 registered properties, which correspond to 590 billions and is equivalent to 70% of Colombia's GDP. Second, nearly 50% of the Bogota district resorts are collected under property tax. The entity that represents the Catastral Authority in Bogota is Unidad Administrativa Especial de Catastro Distrital. This entity takes into account certain variables when performing the cadastral update, like physical characteristics, like area, qualification of the property granted by an evaluator, and the age of the property. Geographic locations, like location in the city, distance to real estate landmarks such as parks and hospitals, and locality in which the property is located and access to nearby roads. Economic characteristics like socioeconomics and economic activity of the sector. But what is the problem? First, generally the cadastral inspector has to travel big distance, wasting a lot of time between a point to other. Taking into account factors like rain, wind, and traffic, and with the global situation with COVID-19, make this a long and expensive process, even longer. And second, currently, hedonic models are being used and the entity seeks to implement new methodologies that allow it to obtain better results. What do we propose? The objective of this project is to improve the current value estimation process by decreasing in 50% the time it takes a cadastral inspector to gather, consolidate, and obtain a final result. This by developing a service in which a user evaluates and studies different statistical methodologies based on an historical data on some other external information land parameters.
Yes, Laura, that is right. So this is the web application that we propose to tackle the objective and the problem that you just said. This web application actually is tended to be used by two kinds of users. One is the administrative person that belongs to the Catastral Distrital, and the second one is a normal user who probably it's a landowner and wants to get some kind of knowledge in the topic. So here, what we are showing, it's a quick overview of what is this web application about. It's a quick guide in which we explain which are the three main sections that can be accessed from the selector of the left, this one. So let's start with the EDA. In this section, the user can explore the available data used along the project. So to make it more user-friendly, here we made a filter so the user can filter by any interesting variable that is available to filter by. So for example, let me filter, I don't know, let's say type of property, and here the available values to filter by are these ones. So let's filter by type of home is a house. Here we have an example of the available data, and if the user wants to get a deep dive in the information that is available, he can always enter here and explore the data. This is a lot of number that the user can filter by. But first, let's understand how is this data distributed per location in Bogota. So you can see Suba is the location with more available data overall, and the stratum tree as well. But now let's understand some key attributes of the record that can be interesting for our analysis. First, we have the land area. This is how much area in meters belongs to a property. So as you can see here, there are some peaks around these numbers. That means that there are more records with this amount of land area available to explore. So for example, we are showing here the top 10 land areas measured in meters. So we have 239 records that have around 188 meters. We have 97 records that have 5 meters. And so in our analysis, we included as a added value, we included in our dataset the distance from the evaluated property to some interesting places, such as parks, highways, museums, train station, and some others. So let's focus in this first in the first row, which is a property that it is located in the neighborhood Los Angeles, which has a value of sale of this number, and which has a distance to a park less than 1 kilometer, has a distance to the museum between 2 and 3 kilometers, a cemetery between 5 and 6, highway between 0 and 1 kilometer, and here so on. This is a super interesting thing that we added to our dataset to make it more rightful and insightful to our understand. But now let's understand how these interesting placed distance are related to the final sale value. So according to these relations, let's focus in this table and let's focus only in those darker and lighter colors. So for example, we have here the distance to a soccer court. Here, what we are saying, this number, what it's saying to us, is that the final value increases in 0.42 value units, while the distance to a soccer court increases in 1 kilometer. As in the other hand, we have the distance, for example, to a museum that have a negative relationship, in which we are saying that while the distance to a museum increases by 1 kilometer, here the final sale value decreases by 0.34 value units. This means that the distance to a museum is more important than a distance to a soccer court regarding the final value of sale. Okay, now let's jump to the ESDA. Here, the ESDA exploratory spatial analysis, we also made a filter to make it more insightful in any variable. So first, let's start with the construction area. Here in the construction area, what we can see is that those darker colors means that special neighborhood or location have more construction area than the other ones. So for example here, the neighborhood Centro Industrial, as you can recall from the neighborhood name, it's an industrial area which have a lot of construction area compared to other places like the Jardín Botánico, which has less construction area than other places. Here, those that are lighter have less construction area than other places. This kind of information, and visually of course, is super insightful for future analysis and strategic decisions. Let's see, for example, the distance to museums. So here, for example, what we can see is that probably all museums in Bogota are located around these places, which as you can see are lighter than these places, which means that they are super far away, more than 10 kilometers or 9 kilometers far from the museums. This is super insightful for us to get a lot of information and make some deep dive analysis. So now let's jump to the model section. This model section was mainly constructed for those users that belongs to the administrative Catastral digital area. Here they can have a kind of deep dive in all of those models that we made using this information that was presented before, and here they can choose one model out of these 6 here presented, these 6 options, and have a quick view on which are the metadata used, some key results, some key metrics that we extract from the model, and which were the variables used to get that model. So in this case, I'm showing the linear regression. Here, of course, they can enter here to the random forest and see, okay, how much training data was used, which was the score training, the score in the test, and here so on, see variables used, and so on. So here, to conclude, we are presenting a framework in which we are showing to the user the evaluation models that can be used to tackle the objective that we just that we said some minutes ago in this model. Now I'm back to you, Laura.
Our proposed tool creates an ecosystem in which these main actors can do the following. First, understand which key attributes are taken into account in the catastral appraising. And second, simulate based on historical data which can be the final sale value for a specific property based on these characteristics. For Carlos, the cadastral inspector, and the cadastral unit, this implies a huge save in some resource such as time, money, and people resource. Let's imagine the case in which the cadastral wants to estimate the property value for the next year in Bogota. This for new and old properties. In this case, Carlos just needs to update some variables, such as distance to a newly constructed place, let's say a new Transmilenio station or a new school. Or could be that the land now has the new constructed building with some characteristics like stratum, administration value, quantity of the garage, elevators, and so on. For this case, Carlos could get, with less time and money spent, the new estimated value for the property for the next year. Now let's take Andres, a landowner who barely knows how this appraisal cadastral methodology works, but wants to know how much its property will cost the next year if he constructs something in place or leave it as is. As the cadastral is public information, he can use our tool, which enables him to input a couple of variables and obtain the desired result, the estimate of his property value for the next year. With all of this information in mind, there are a lot of opportunities for improvement in the cadastral appraisal world, in which data science can play an important role, this by making it easier and less expensive the process of appraisal.